So why don't we start out with you giving an introduction, your name, what you do, what you study, and some fun facts if you want to throw in them in there.
Sure. Oh, right now? Okay,
Yeah,
that's
go
fine.
for it. Yeah.
All right. Hello. Oh, I just wanted to check if I have my name right there. Okay. Hello. My name is Ovul Sezer. I'm going to say Ovul Sezer in the Turkish way because I'm going to say both. Sorry. Sorry. The reason is, can I explain myself before we start?
Yeah,
Sorry
of
about that.
course.
So obviously I introduced myself as Ovul, but now that some very kind but patriotic Turkish audience also follows me sometimes, not that, I mean, it's just maybe two people, but like when I say my name in the English way, they're like, why don't you say it in the Turkish way? So I'm like, oh, okay, if they feel left out, I'm just going to say both ways. Is that okay for you? Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, thank you. All right, here we go again. Hello, hi Alex. My name is Ovul Sezer. Ovul Sezer, as we say in English. I'm an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. I teach negotiations and decision making at the business school, Kenan-Flagler Business School, and I'm very interested in the social mistakes that we make. I study something that I call impression mismanagement and how we fail when we try to impress others, even though we think we are doing a good job. So, in a nutshell, that's me. And fun fact, I also do stand-up comedy.
That's
I'm so
great.
excited about that fun fact.
You nailed it. Yeah. Um, yeah, thanks for being here. So maybe you could expand a little bit on impression mismanagement and kind of some ways that people interact with each other that might be incorrect.
Sure. The more I studied this phenomenon, the more I realized there are actually so many different areas of life that gets impacted by these mistakes. And what do I mean by these mistakes? Let's say if I ask anybody, do you know what's the best way to self-promote? Do we know how to brag? No, we have some intuitions about it. We have some guesses and we do all sorts of things, even some sophisticated strategies. But do we actually really know what works? Probably not. What about compliments? Think about a time where you receive a compliment. It's a pretty awkward moment, maybe. Or maybe, I mean, great moment, but a little. Well, as someone who gets lots of compliments, speaking of bragging, or giving a compliment may be awkward too. There's actually research on that, and we may shy away from that. And there are some weird compliments out there. If someone says, "Oh, you're funny for a young woman," what does that really mean? Do I say thank you, for instance? How do we give feedback? Like, for instance, think about this phrase, "I told you so." Right? It's such a universal phrase. Every language has that. Every language has that phrase, which I find fascinating. And we know how bad it is to hear that. Like when someone says, "Oh, I told you so," you never say, "Oh, thank you." Like, don't tell me that. Yet when we have the opportunity to do that, we do go. We go with it. We say it. Or think about a time where you were in a networking event. Do we know how to network effectively, or is it just like full awkwardness all around and we're trying to navigate our world? So all of these different questions are under the impression mismanagement umbrella, and all of these areas are, I do study all of these behaviors. And what I find very interesting is that, again, almost universally, we have a very similar intuition about what may work, but those intuitions may be misguided often. And I focus on the situations where it's actually misguided and it actually backfires. And just one more sentence about impression mismanagement. Obviously, these are mistakes and it makes you look bad. It doesn't fulfill the purpose. But I'm even more interested in the sort of long-term downstream consequences of that too. If you think about it, it's not just about the impression either. Someone may do something, you may do something, people don't like you or you don't like them. Okay, life goes on. But that's a very important outcome. We care about being liked and respected. But even more important, moreover, who gets hired, who gets promoted, whether we make a deal in a negotiation, whether you get the client in your business presentation, or who gets the second date, if you think about your personal relationships, or what's been said in the diversity meeting in these organizations. All of these things, all of these very important relationships and important decisions depend on whether someone says the right thing or has failed to say the right thing. And I'm very interested in the downstream consequences of these behaviors as well.
So it seems like, you're describing this as a very high stakes kind of
I think it's high stakes.
faux pas, right?
Yeah.
Like in certain contexts, you may not get, called back for a second interview or a second date or whatever. So what are some of the reasons why people might make these mistakes? Why they might think that what they're saying is the right thing to say if, there are these high stakes involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I am also trying to think about the whole theoretical framework of these behaviors. Why do we even have these behaviors? And just to name a few again, we talked about "I told you so" a little bit already. This "you're confident for a young woman" would be a backhanded compliment, or why do people hit on me even when I'm in my sweatpants? I like the hair toss with this example. That would be an example of humble brag. Just to name a few examples of these behaviors. The more interesting, the more puzzling and intriguing question for me is also, why do we have these behaviors in the first place? And I think there are multiple reasons, and that's what we find in our data too. So first of all, there's the multiple audience problem, right? Like in the workplace, in our meetings, for instance, we have our peers, but we also have our superiors, let's say. Or on social media, you have your work friends, or you have your friends, or you have your connections who you want to impress a little bit and let them know about, your successes and accomplishments, achievements. At the same time, you have your childhood friends too. So everybody's together watching you almost, which creates this conflicting self-presentational goal problem. Sometimes, we want to be liked and respected at the same time. In every relationship, these two goals coexist, yet these two goals entail different strategies, right? If I want to be liked, I would be just what we know from previous self-presentation literature. And by the way, for our audience who's interested in the academic side of these things, there are so many great papers, but I can recommend the classic book by Goffman, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. It's a marvelous book coming from late 50s, I believe. So it will be introduction to all of these topics. So we all care about being liked and respected, but those things are not compatible with each other, right? If I want to be liked, for instance, I would be maybe smiling and giving you compliments, ingratiation, let's say. But if I want to signal my competence, then that means I need to brag a little. I need to say, hey, I studied math back in the day, which is true, but just like inserting my brags here and there. So, but how about, like, what happens when we want both of these things at the same time? That's one reason why we make the mistake of humble bragging, for instance. That's one. Or sometimes the mistakes would stem from about feelings. Again, maybe giving a compliment makes you feel awkward, and that's why you don't see how much happy it makes the other side, let's say. Or "I told you so." If we go back to "I told you so," we know it's bad to hear it. No one would say, "Oh, I thought it would be helpful for them to learn from me and hear me say I told you so." No one ever says that. Yet being right feels so good, right? We can't let that go. So that's another reason. I know I keep going because I'm super passionate about the subject. I hope it's fine. But another example that I'm going to give, we also have this recent paper that focused on the phenomenon of hiding success. Sometimes you would also hide things. Let's say, a pregnant woman would not tell her friend who's having problems with fertility, let's say. Or let's say you're making more than your sibling, Would you go and tell them, hey, I have a salary increase of, $50,000 per year? Like, probably not. And that's out of the relational concern. That's because maybe we think, oh, if I say that, maybe it would create a comparison and would make them feel upset or something. Yet what we find is that when the recipient of this behavior finds out about your success and finds out that you haven't shared it with them, it's so offensive. It's like, you don't tell me because you think I'll be jealous? You think I won't be happy for you? So even though it's done with all the good intentions to protect the other side, it actually backfires pretty badly, and it's a very insulting, offensive thing. So there are lots of reasons why these behaviors happen. Another example, ghosting. Like, ghosting is not a welcome behavior, but I mean, a lot of people who had to ghost in our studies told us it still feels so bad to make that talk. Sorry, it's not me, it's you. Instead of that, they choose not to follow up. So sometimes we don't even know it's a mistake. Sometimes we know that it's not the best way, but still the other benefits, like emotional benefits or relationship maintenance, would make it seem like it's the best strategy to go. In a nutshell, that's the theoretical framework as well of impression mismanagement.
So you mentioned a couple of examples of like humble bragging and self-promotion and backhanded compliments. I'm wondering if you have any other like favorite examples of humble bragging or whatever that you think are, especially funny, or like, a famous person said it, or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of famous examples. We can just go to Twitter and find out a few more. Like, this Sunday is, I think, the Grammy Awards, like the March, and I'm sure a lot of people who, when they get the awards, there will be some maybe humble brags, just a hypothesis. But how about, I don't know if I have a favorite one, although one very common one, which I find funny, and it's like this is also, I would argue this may be universal too, because I know that it's very common in the US and common in other cultures. Like when people are asked, what's your biggest weakness question in a job interview? Not surprisingly, a lot of people say, oh, I'm a perfectionist. It's so hard to deal with, Alex. You don't even know being a perfectionist. Or I think the other popular one was, oh, I work too hard. I prioritize work above everything else. And the third super common category is I'm too nice. People take advantage of me. Oh no, that we ran so many studies with that, like lots of surveys with employed individuals, MBA students or undergraduate students, or general public through online samples. And usually, I mean, all of the answers were great, but one that I remember was very funny, I think, was, I'm too demanding when it comes to fairness. Like, how come that's a weak? So there's so many examples. But the reason why I wanted to highlight this example is sometimes because the humble bragging is a term, I'm not sure if it's invented in social media, but it's sort of spread from, at least it became too visible to all of us that finally people had the need to have a term for it, right? When the social media became a very permanent force in our lives. So a lot of people think of these sort of almost outrageous humble brags that exist on Twitter, Facebook. But what we have shown is that, yes, those humble brags exist, but it also happens in very high stakes situations, such as job interviews, or it happens in the workplace as well. It's not just about looks or flying first class. There are some other very relatable examples of that.
So, you kind of dipped into this, but like, are there certain contexts? I know, like online, for instance, you mentioned Twitter. Are there certain contexts in which you think these kind of impression mismanagement things happen? For certain reasons.
Yeah, like just for humble brags or for all of them, of course. Like maybe
Why
everywhere.
don't we start with we go with humble brags? Yeah.
Just for humble brags. Well, I mean, social media is a place where it's a lot of humble bragging or bragging, right? And that's also a fascinating thing to look at. I think, like, how come that became the norm? I think the lack of negative feedback also in face-to-face interactions, makes the problem more perpetuating. Like, we all know that person who humble brags in our lives, I think, or some person is more likely to come to our minds. Yet it's very unlikely that I would be, giving an eye roll. Like, I wouldn't do that. But probably just because of the conversational norms, we would try to comfort them. We would be like, oh, you're exhausted from getting elected to leadership positions. That must be so hard. I'm so, I'm so sorry. Oh, it must be so hard to be tired from signing autographs, if you have a famous friend. Uh, so social media made it more visible, and I think the problem right now perpetuates and maybe it has become a little bit contagious. Actually, with some research projects right now, I'm trying to get at that, whether it's contagious or not. Likely, right? Like, it's like the norm of social media is really, hey, look at my amazing life, almost. So but I think in general, anytime these sorts of goals are involved, the dual goal of being liked or respected, or having the multiple audience in the room, or you want to be liked and you want to say something nice, but you still want to elicit your status, for in case of compliment, for instance. So I wouldn't say one place or one context more likely than other to generate these behaviors, because there are, again, so many factors playing a role in it. But some of the things that we can think of, the lack of more negative feedback on social media makes it very likely. I think competitive environments make it happen, and I think, in fact, right now, especially in our remote world, there is some competition for attention, I feel like, right? How many followers do you have? How much time can I get? Like, if you think about it, even a video on YouTube that's more than a certain number of minutes, people are like, no, sorry, I don't have time for that. I can only, we are living in a world where everyone is competing for our attention. So it's very important to let other people know about your expertise, and you don't have much time, right? You only have the short amount of time. And all these shortcuts lead to these mistakes. Another self-promotion, or I define it as a networking behavior that I study, is name dropping. Right? It's never a name mentioning, right? It's if I say something like, oh, over the barbecue party, Zuck told me that Facebook is having some serious issues. Again, I'm giving some very outrageous examples just to make them memorable. Or this can also happen if I imagine I casually drop the name of a high status institution into our conversation, even though it was very unnecessary. Let's say I say something like, oh, at Princeton, we used to have coffee in the morning. Like, did I need to say Princeton? Like, no, but you can. So this is another shortcut, right? And the reason why it's a drop, why it's like a casual mention, is because we know we can't just give the information right away, but we still want to say it. And in that short amount of time, you try to do multiple things. You try to be like, oh, see, I'm friends with cool people, or I went to this great school, but you also wanted to make it casual. So that type of competition, the scarce resource of time, attention, and the importance of letting everybody know about what you can bring into the table, makes it even harder to navigate. So.
So since it's so important to be able to, represent yourself, in a high, in a, self-promotional manner, let's say,
Uh-huh.
but doing so in certain ways can lead to, people to dislike you, for instance.
Yeah.
What are some strategies or some ways in which people can try to sneak in, some things about themselves without triggering like this feeling of dislike?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And I think there are some ways. Luckily, even though it looks like we do have some misguided intuition out there that exists because of all these reasons that we listed, there are some productive ways to do it. So the first thing I want to say, based on, again, the research and the literature, there's lots of really great work on emotions. One of the very interesting emotions in life is this emotion of pride. Right? It's fascinating in all sense. Like, wow, like it feels great to feel pride, but then do you share it or not? And researchers in this domain have actually identified that there are different types of pride. One is this authentic pride, the other is this hubristic pride. And just by even by the titles of these categories, you can guess the hubristic pride is this, the person is so proud and they are attributing their success to their innate qualities. And it's like, me, I'm great. That's the feeling. Whereas the authentic pride is they attribute their qualities to not their innate things, but other things, like, oh, I worked so hard for this and I got in, something like that. And even the way I say, even those sentences, if I say, I'm so smart, versus if I say, I work so hard, those things feel different to us. So first of all, the observers of our behavior can distinguish these two things very well. So that's one thing to remember. So anytime we want to self-promote, I wouldn't say, oh, let's not self-promote. Like, because especially those of us who are at the sort of junior years or earlier ends of the career, like, we have to say, this is what I can do. This is what I, like, in a very genuine way, almost. Like, I'm not saying we should all brag. That's not what I'm trying to say. But shying away from, okay, I'm not going to do anything, will not work, unfortunately. So the best way to do it is always to remember that people actually can see the authenticity behind our brags. So how can we make it very authentic so that people actually join us and celebrate with us, share the joy and celebrate our success? So if you, I guess the best way, the most productive way is to find someone else to brag for you. That's an amazing, amazing strategy. In fact, anytime I share this strategy, I try to make a pact with the friend I'm talking to. So let's make a pact. We'll brag on behalf of each other. Deal? Okay, yes, I trust you. Okay, we got we got each other's back. So that's one way. Otherwise, if we are the one who needs to broadcast, combining your brag with positive emotions is definitely a positive thing to do. I'm really happy about this. I'm so excited about this. Gratitude is even better because you're giving credit to your teammates, and that really signals some humility. Oh, I'm so happy we got this award, and I'm so grateful to this amazing team. Without them, I wouldn't be able to do it. That's definitely much more humble than these other strategies. And plus, you give the information of the brag and accomplishment as well. One caveat: gratitude is great, but the using blessed may backfire. I don't know if it's because if it's used a lot on social media,
Is like
or
specifically the word blessed?
specifically the word blessed. I'm so blessed to be the keynote. And I think some of it is, oh, you think God is on your side? No, like there's some, it's not or maybe it has become a cliche a little bit too. There's definitely that.
What about hashtag blessed?
I haven't checked the hashtag blessed, but I actually have checked what happens if you put a hashtag humble brag next to your brags. And my hypothesis was actually that it would make it better, right? Because you recognize what you're doing and you're like, hey, humble brag, like you know what? To my surprise, it was worse than the humble brag. And I think the reasons there, oh, you think you're cool, but you're not. In fact, that would also, that didn't make it to paper, but that study didn't make it to our paper. But I think that definitely supports what the previous research on bragging has found as well. It's so hard to cancel a boast. So something that we also do, I don't mean to brag or not to brag. Like, I wouldn't call out any attention to the behavior. So we shouldn't say, I don't mean to brag. Oh, this is a brag. Just no, not do, we shouldn't do it. Creating context for your brags is a strategy that works. There is one reason why these social media examples are also a little more outrageous is because nobody needed to know. Right? Like, why did I feel the need to tell the world, oh, my Uber driver thought I'm 18? Like, no, there wasn't any reason to say that, yet people do it. So if there's a context, if there was like a question or something, it's a little better. And also when I love that paper too, another paper has shown when people are cognitively busy, and if you have your attempts to self-promote during that busy time, they actually don't think you're bragging, but they still remember the information. So it's a good way to not seem like bragging. Like maybe if let's say you're trying to impress, a date or somebody, like if they're looking at the menu, you can insert, oh, by the way, I'm doing this other great thing, just to give an example. But overall, I would say positive emotions, gratitude, creating more context, giving credit to your teammates or luck, and of course finding a wingman, an intermediary to broadcast for us. That's very effective.
That is a fantastic summary. I know, so it's almost 3, and I don't want to push you that much over time. I'd love to ask a couple more questions.
Absolutely. Yes, let's do it.
So I think you recently have a paper about wow, I'm blanking. You had a paper last year about how, oh my God.
Could be. But I think the most recent one was the hiding success one.
Yes, that's the one.
That
Sorry.
One? Yeah.
I found it fascinating, and I knew I found it fascinating. I just couldn't remember what I had found fascinating.
Totally fine. I actually never remember anything about papers unless, only when I'm citing them, I just check, oh, okay, that was that paper. I remember the paper. I just don't know the name or the people.
Yeah, you're like, that was a great paper. I need to cite it, but I need to figure out what I'm citing. Yeah, so hiding success, I found it very fascinating. People prefer to, I guess this is kind of a counter, like the opposite of the humble brag.
Yeah.
Bragging, I guess, is to just not mention it.
Yeah.
So could you, I found the paper fascinating because you kind of have the opposite of what you'd expect to happen. Mm-hmm. So could you just talk about a little bit about
sure
what the results were and how you came up to?
Sure, absolutely. So what I also loved working on that paper. First of all, we had a great team and we always share our success. That's with well, Humblebragging is with Francesca Gina and Mike Norton, and Hiding Success is with Annabelle Roberts and Emma Levine. So just to also say hi to them from here. But the very fascinating issue is really, like you said, it's almost another sophisticated strategy in the opposite direction. Right, people are this time, and I think the reason for this behavior is different from just the impression management concerns that we talked about when we go over humble bragging. In this paper, on the other hand, okay, sometimes we do have this impression. We always have the impression management concerns, right? I want to look smart, I want to look beautiful, I want to look great, and I also want to look friendly and warm so that people actually hang out with me, but also respect me, which is not always possible to get with just one statement. So these are impression management concerns. You can also have some intrapsychic concerns, right? Engaging in some behavior or avoiding some behavior may make you feel better about yourself, less awkward, things like that. And there's a third set of considerations, which was the focus of this paper, which we call these relational concerns. So this time, imagine, and this happens like even from a very young age. These are the examples that we came across. Imagine you got a great grade on an exam, on a math exam, you got like 95 out of 100. And let's say your best friend got 60 or 50, or, they are not happy with their grade. Do you tell them, or do you just like try to keep quiet about this? Right? It's a very understandable thing. And I think that's one of the things that's super fascinating in our paper, because we had lots of different samples. Like we had, again, the general public or high school seniors who are waiting for their college acceptance letters, or we have run a study with physicians who are waiting for their match day, medical school match day results, MBA students for their internships, and lots of people from different walks of life, yet they have this intuition. So where does this intuition come from? Like we have it. And the issue is when you hide, you have this concern. And we looked at lots of different motivations. Like we tried to find out, why do people do this? Is it because they want to avoid feeling awkward? Is it because they want to avoid seeming like bragging? Even though these things also play a role to some extent, the highest goal, the highest motivation that they gave us when they did ratings in our studies was this desire to prevent the other side from making them feel envious or upset or bad about themselves. I'm not sharing it with you so that it doesn't create any bad feelings for you. So even though it's done with the protective instinct, let's say, it is one of the most offensive things for the other side. And we have found that sharing is always better. Even if they get envious, they still feel happy for you too. Like even if you're in the most competitive situation, imagine, you're like really fighting for the same thing, still they want to know it from you. Why? Because when people don't share, then we start ruminating. So imagine you have your friend, co-worker, they didn't tell you about the promotion, but then someone else came and like congratulated them. And you're like, why didn't you tell me? And this rumination, then the conclusion that we arrive is that, oh, you think I'll be threatened by your success, and you are trying to regulate how I feel. And we conceptualize this, we gave this title, paternalistic motives, right? How you're trying to sort of control my emotions, and that's so offensive. And the fact that the person thinks you would just be jealous of them and not happy for them is also super offensive. So the recipients of this behavior feel very insulted and offended compared to sharing success. They feel less close to you. And we also looked at lots of behavioral outcomes of this. They trust you less, they want to collaborate with you less. And it's just not a productive way of managing our impressions. We did look at impression management outcomes as well. People also don't think you are, when you hide, nobody thinks you're warmer or more competent. You also lose on the impression management side for sure. But the goal of this behavior is mostly about the relational concerns. And that also backfires in that domain, meaning that you don't actually protect the relationship, you hurt the relationship by hiding. Yeah.
Well, with all of the different ways that you can make mistakes socially, it's a miracle anyone has any friends.
Yeah, how do we navigate? Yeah, it's a kind of, it's all a facade, the popularity facade that we live in. Maybe we just like go around. I wouldn't say that actually. I think so. That's the probably the next steps for me, that I really love identifying these mistakes, but at the same time I'm very fascinated why these intuitions exist in the first place. And I think these intuitions serve some goal too, right? There is a reason why these are so universal and so common. And that's why probably sometimes we're successful in maintaining our relationships and making a good impression.
Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Um, if you'd like people to follow you, where could they follow you to get more from you?
Sure, of course. Oh my goodness. Now I feel like this is great. This is the first time I'm reading this. All right. So I guess Twitter is one common for people to see my humble brags. No, I try to avoid, but you can call out if I humble brag. So how about that? That's packed. Just my first name, last name, Ovul Sezer. And in fact, in all platforms like LinkedIn, Instagram, I have that name. So just my first name, last name, and looking forward to connect with people and looking forward to questions if they have any. I also would love to learn from people. One of my favorite moments is at any conference or anything. Sometimes people would share their own experience of awkward moments, which would give a great idea for a research project. So I would love that too. We are all in this together.
Well, I'll make sure to encourage people to send you their awkward moments.
Absolutely.